pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, be a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. All the flags. Commissioners, we have a agenda before us today. Rather short one in terms of items, but maybe lengthy in terms of discussion. So anyway, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? All right, doesn't look like it. So
I was going to move approval of the agenda.
okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Commissioner Nyberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Yes.
The motion to approve the agenda passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I have a few announcements to make. At our next open meeting on May 21, all three electric investor-owned utilities will give presentations on their reliability metrics. The Commission's reliability tracking and reporting requirements help identify areas for improvement and help us prioritize which improvements the utility should be making. So the utilities and PRC utility staff will report on outages, the causes of the outages, lines, feeders, and customers that were affected. And that is all interesting information. More important than that is what we can glean from that information. So where should we prioritize investments? What areas should we focus on first as we continue to improve the grid? So that, that's one thing that I'll be looking for. The presentations will take place as part of our regular open meeting. So please, if you're interested in that, tune in. Also want to make a quick announcement and then want to see if Commissioner O'Connell wants to add anything. From May 31 to June 3, the PRC is going to be hosting the Western Conference Public Service Commissioners Conference meeting at the Tamaya Hotel near Albuquerque. So we'll have commissioners, staff, industry, and stakeholders, primarily from the West, here to discuss water issues, telecom, affordability, load growth, economic development, geothermal, and many other topics. Commissioner O'Connell is leading that effort. I want to see if you wanted to add anything, Commissioner.
No, just progress report. It's coming together beautifully. We're going to have a wonderful vessel, and everyone who attends will help us fill it.
Well, thank you to everybody who is involved in planning that conference. It is definitely coming together, and I look forward to being there and participating. Next, I have a closed meeting disclosure. On April 29, 2026, the Commission met in a closed meeting, which was closed pursuant to NMSA 10.15.1H3. Deliberations by a public body in connection with an administrative adjudicatory proceeding. I affirm for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited only to those specified in the separate notice and agenda for that closed meeting that was published prior to the meeting. I further affirm that no final actions were taken in the closed meeting. Commissioners, do you have any other announcements? Okay. It looks like we don't, so we could move on then to our next agenda item, which is public comment. And so we'll be taking comment from public officials first. We'll check here in the room and then online to see if there are any public officials. And after that, we'll move on to any public comment we might have on today's agenda items. And then after that, we'll take comment on any other items. And so this portion of the agenda is limited to 30 minutes total. I am expecting that we will have several commenters, and so please respect the 3-minute timeline for your comments so that we can hear from as many people as we can in those 30 minutes. So do we have any public officials in the room? Do we have any online? Are we expecting?
Mr. Chair, we have a few online.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll start it.
Yeah, thank you.
First, Representative Harlan Vincent, go ahead with your comment.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead with your comment.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, and members of the Public Regulation Commission. I just wanted to phone in and give my support for the Blackstone and PNM merger. And as well, my name is Harlan Vincent. I'm the state representative for District 56, proudly serving Lincoln and Otero counties. And I'm here today to express the support for the proposed Blackstone infrastructure and PNM partnership. As a legislator, my focus is always on, what brings long-term value and stability and opportunity to the people of New Mexico. And after reviewing the comments outlined in the proposal, I believe this transaction offers meaningful benefits for our state, our taxpayers, and our future energy infrastructure. It sounds like the proposal brings unprecedented customer service benefits, including significant rate relief for residential customers, delayed rate increases, expanded assistance for low-income families, workforce development, investments, and funding to support economic growth with clean energy and innovation. And, we always like the stability because Lincoln County we haven't been stable in a little while. And that's, a lot of the reasons that I like this. I'm also encouraged by the commitments to keep PNM locally managed, maintain its headquarters in New Mexico, protect our employees and labor agreements, and continue investing in our communities, including rural, tribal, and Pueblo communities. As someone who represents rural New Mexico, I understand how important and reliable and affordable energy is to families, small businesses, agriculture, and economic development. Our state needs strong infrastructure, expanded transmission capacity, and long-term capital investments if we're going to remain competitive and continue growing. I believe this partnership positions New Mexico for that future while maintaining the oversight and authority of this commission to protect public interest. For those reasons, I respectfully support this application and encourage the commission to give it strong consideration. Thank you for your time and thank you for serving the people of New Mexico.
Okay, thank you. Next, Senator Thornton.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is, Commissioners, my name is Ant Thornton, and I'm the state senator for District 19, representing the East Mountains in Bernalillo, Santa Fe, Torrance, and Sandoval counties. I rise today in support of the proposed acquisition of PNM by Blackstone Infrastructure, with a clear condition that this commission lock in strong, enforceable ring fencing protections to safeguard New Mexico ratepayers. So we all recognize the scale of the challenge ahead. New Mexico is being asked to meet growing electricity demand while transitioning to carbon-free generation. That requires significant long-term capital, and this transaction brings that capital, along with $239 million in direct customer and community benefits, including $105 million in rate credits and additional savings through deferred rate increases. But capital alone is not enough. Structure matters. That's why I urge this commission to make explicit that PNM must maintain its own independent balance sheet, credit ratings, and cash flow, be protected from any effort to load parent company debt onto the utility, and include any legal safeguards that make it bankruptcy remote. In other words, so that it cannot be pulled into financial distress caused by its parent. These are not abstract concepts. They are the difference between a utility that serves the public interest and one that could be exposed to risk outside of the state. Now, to its credit, this proposal keeps what matters local. PNM remains headquartered here, locally managed, and fully regulated under the authority of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And it keeps the union agreements intact as well. Now, critics will say that private capital brings risk, and that's true if left unchecked. But this commission has the authority to ensure it is checked through enforceable conditions and not assumptions. So the question is not whether we accept outside investment. The question is whether we structure it intelligently. So with strong ring fencing in place, this transaction can deliver both the capital needed for reliability and growth and the protections that ratepayers deserve. So I encourage the commission to approve this transaction, but to do so with firm, durable guardrails that ensure PNM remains financially sound, operationally independent, and fully accountable to the people of New Mexico. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mike Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher, you're muted.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Good morning, Mike Gallagher, County Manager of Eddy County. I'm calling in and expressing my support for case number 25-0066. This is the application from Southwestern Public Service Company, Xcel Energy, an application for a balanced portfolio of energy projects and transmission projects. We all know that economic opportunities in New Mexico are tied to grid expansion and energy infrastructure. This application from Xcel Energy supports jobs, tax-based stability, and industrial growth in Southeast New Mexico. This application reduces reliancy on emergency or temporary generation sources during periods of high demand. This application also maintains fuel diversity and grid resiliency during extreme weather events. And I just want to say that on behalf of Eddy County, myself, and our county commission, that we support, the Eddy County Commission supports this application from Xcel Energy. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there, oh, I'm sorry. I see City Councilor Brooke Basson. Go ahead with your comment.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Brooke Basson, and I serve on the Albuquerque City Council representing District 4. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, and I'm here today to offer a perspective grounded in community leadership, economic opportunity, and support for working families, and to express support for the PNM acquisition. I come from a family of local small business owners, so I understand firsthand how important stability, predictability, and reliability in infrastructure is to businesses and families across our city and state. When businesses are deciding whether to invest, expand, or create jobs, reliable infrastructure matters. It directly impacts economic confidence and local long-term growth. As a city leader, I believe New Mexico must continue creating an environment where businesses can succeed, communities can grow, and families can build a future here at home. Albuquerque continues to grow, and with that growth comes increased demands on infrastructure, public services, and community resources. Reliable energy infrastructure supports everything from neighborhood development and public safety to schools, healthcare facilities, and local businesses. Long-term investment and planning are essential if we want our communities to remain safe, competitive, and prepared for the future. Additionally, this acquisition presents an opportunity to help lift people up by delivering real benefits directly to New Mexico families through the proposed $10 million expansion of the PNM Good Neighbor Fund. which would triple annual funding for assistance to low-income PNM customers and families across PNM's service territory who are struggling with their utility bills. I also believe strongly in creating opportunities for the next generation of New Mexicans. This acquisition proposal includes meaningful commitments to workforce training, economic development, and a long-term infrastructure investment. These types of investments help create pathways for young people and working families to succeed and remain in New Mexico. I also appreciate the continued commitment to maintain local leadership, local employees, and community investment throughout New Mexico. Having continued local presence matters because strong community partnerships and accountability are important to a long-term success of our state. From my perspective, this acquisition is about supporting thoughtful long-term investment, economic opportunity, and stability for New Mexico families and communities. I respectfully encourage the Commission to approve this application. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public officials on Zoom here to give public comment? Mr. Chair, that's it for public officials.
Is it public comment now?
Almost. So we'll first be taking public comment on any items that we have on today's agenda. Is there anybody in person wishing to provide public comment? We do have one.
No. Okay. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Bridget Condon with Consumer Energy Alliance. We are here to promote and support policies that promote affordable and reliable power. I have been proud to come and support this Excel and SPS filing previously on behalf of and as a board member of the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. I want to remind you the strong support that you have heard from organizations such as the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce, economic development organizations between Hobbs, Clovis, and Carlsbad. You've heard from many public officials on this issue, probably most notably Mayor Tim Jennings and Senator Ezell. I'm sure none of us will forget those comments in Roswell. So again, just wanted to say thank you for the time that you spent touring Southeast New Mexico. It really means so much to the area that would be impacted by this filing and to those communities who often do not have a voice when these meetings are held in Santa Fe and Albuquerque. So again, on behalf of Consumer Energy Alliance and so many organizations, individuals, and communities in New Mexico, we ask that you support the SPS filing, knowing that economic success and power reliability in the southeast corner means success for the entire state. Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on today's agenda item? Okay, please.
My name is Sharon Argenbright, and I've lived here for 33 years, and I'm watching the environment, and I'm doing everything I can to preserve our environment. I'm against this merger. I ask why?
Ma'am,
Why?
let me just hold on for a second because I want to check that we don't have that item on today's agenda. And so I want to make sure that we get through any public comment on items that we are voting on today. So do we have any other public comment on today's agenda items in person? Do we have any online? Can you check, Patrick?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anyone online for agenda.
Oh, yes, we do. I do.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Cynthia. Are you here to give
Yes,
public comment on some?
Yes, I'm here to give a public comment on the acquisition of PNM by Blackstone.
Yeah. So once again, that's not an action item for today, so we're not at that point yet. So just checking again if we have any public comment on the agenda items that we have on today's agenda. Okay, it seems like we do not, so thank you for bearing with me on that. Ma'am, you can continue on with your comment. So, and just to be clear, that there's no agenda item that we're voting on with respect to the proceeding that you highlighted, but please proceed with your comment.
Thank you for not voting on it. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for almost 50 years. I care about people. A healthy environment is very important for the longevity of our civilization. Again, I ask, why is this power grab for our electric grid? Why? Why are people grabbing? And I'm studying up on the trail, OpenAI, and the data centers. We are doomed if we don't take care of ourselves in a responsible manner. We have to watch what's going on and not go down the wrong road. My electric bill is the highest it's been in 15 years, and it's $12. So I am doing what I can. Water recycling, geothermal, everything. And if we post this P&M industry to an out-of-stater, out-of-country hedge fund, largest in the world, we're dooming ourselves. Please look out for New Mexico. We can do this. We can do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other in-person public comment? We do have one, ma'am, please. Yeah.
Do I need to press this?
Yeah.
It was green. Okay. Hi, I'm Kathleen McLeod. I live in La Cienega. Hello, commissioners. Thank you for being here and making this public comment period available. I've lived in New Mexico since 1983 in the North Valley of Albuquerque and also in La Cienega in Santa Fe County, and I'm here to oppose the Blackstone P&M merger and deal that's trying to be made. I oppose it because I see it as a health and safety issue. I hear a lot about economic development, which I agree is very important. I've raised family, I have grandchildren here, I work here, and I feel the long-term solution, for one thing, a public utility ties into all of our public utilities, water, electric grid, all of it's tied together, and it's short-sighted. Just the way if I make a deal with with my internet provider, a super deal, Verizon, super deal for a year, those rates go up and they have nothing to do with the people that they made the deals with in the beginning. So I just feel like a public utility needs to be kept a public utility and not in the hands of I'll just say a faceless giant corporation. That's all I have to say. I really hope you consider it as a health and safety issue from someone from a community, La Cienega, which has recently had the aquifer, one of the oldest aquifer, it's ancient, in La Cienega has been contaminated by a federal organization. The Army National Guard, through thinking they were doing a great thing by storing firefighting foam that we all need if there's a jet crash. However, it was not managed, and it is contaminated an ancient aquifer. Trying to deal with the federal government once there's been a big mistake, good luck. It's a long, slow process, and I'm involved with that. Like the John Muir said, you pull one string out of one piece of the environment, the whole thing unravels. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have any other in-person public comment? Patrick, can you check online?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have quite a few online, and I'll start with Jason Espinoza.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jason Espinoza, and I serve as the Executive Director of New Mexico IDEA, the statewide economic development professional association, which works to make positive changes in New Mexico's competitive position to promote New Mexico's economic growth, capital investment, and job creation. New Mexico IDEA supports the proposed acquisition of P&M by Blackstone Infrastructure because economic development today depends on one thing above almost everything else: confidence in long-term infrastructure capacity. Reliable, affordable energy infrastructure is now central to how states compete for investment, jobs, and industry growth. When companies evaluate where to locate or expand, they look closely at grid reliability, energy capacity, long-term planning, and whether a state is prepared to support future demand. That reality is especially important for New Mexico right now. Our state is actively competing for advanced manufacturing, energy production, aerospace, technology investment, and many other industries. Those opportunities bring high-quality jobs and long-term economic growth, but they also require significant infrastructure readiness and long-term capital investment. From our perspective, this transaction helps position New Mexico to compete more effectively in that environment. This acquisition provides the long-term financial capacity necessary for PNM to modernize infrastructure, meet increasing energy demand, and continue advancing New Mexico's clean energy transition. We also appreciate the proposal maintains PNM's headquarters leadership and workforce in New Mexico. Local presence matters, stability matters, and those commitments are important not only for employees and customers, but also for the broader business and economic development communities. Economic development professionals understand that growth does not happen by accident. Companies invest where they see long-term stability, infrastructure capacity, and confidence in the future. Transactions like this can help strengthen that confidence. At the end of the day, we view this as more than just a utility transaction. We view it as a strategic investment in New Mexico's long-term economic competitiveness, infrastructure readiness, and capacity for future growth. For those reasons, New Mexico IDEA respectfully urges the Commission to approve this transaction in the public interest. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, Cynthia Baca.
Hi there, thank you. I'm here to state that I do not support the acquisition of PNM by Blackstone. In the Epstein Library on the U.S. Department of Justice, there are financial and tax documents that show that Ghislaine Maxwell was, and the question of possibly is, still a partner of Blackstone, meaning she owned or owns units. These documents also show she owns royalties in Blackstone. Royalties are only under certain items and streams, including natural resources, as well as many other direct financial ownership. Given Ghislaine was involved in a criminal investigation and conviction, such as child sex trafficking, with an active investigation still happening in regards to her current financial streams, a company with partners such as Ghislaine and many others does not grant New Mexicans a safe, reliable, and stable service at fair rates. It begs the question of cash flows that Blackstone is involved in, as cash flows connected to illegal and criminal activity have many implications and questions to be answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Susan Homer.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing public comment. I'm don't have much to say, but I would really like to know, when all this is said and done, why the law might not apply to PNM and Blackstone. And I'm referring to the stock transactions that have been made where Blackstone was buying out PNM. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Shelley Brewing.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I am here today in support of the Blackstone acquisition of PNM. And as a member of the community and the nonprofit community in New Mexico, and I apologize if you can hear the fire truck driving by here, but I'm here today to offer perspective grounded in youth development, STEM education, workforce readiness, and the future of New Mexico. As executive director of R4 Creating, nonprofit focused on STEM education and helping our young people innovate and grow in their careers and stay in our state and community. My work has always been driven by one belief that New Mexico's greatest resource is our young people, and I've dedicated my career to helping students understand that they are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they are given the opportunity, mentorships, and tools to succeed. Through our For Creating, I've worked with students from communities across New Mexico, many of whom have not always had equal access to STEM programs, technology training, internships, or career pathways. What I see every day is that our students are talented, creative, and eager to contribute to their communities and to the future of our state. A major part of preparing students for the future is creating pathways into real careers in industry. The PNM acquisition proposal includes meaningful commitments to workforce training, as well as economic development and long-term infrastructure investment that align with things that we need to make the future of New Mexico prepared for our young people. Helping New Mexico reach its highest potential requires long-term investment, not only in education, but also in infrastructure, innovation, and economic opportunity. And that reliable infrastructure matters because it creates the environment where opportunity can grow. It supports schools, technology programs, workforce partnerships, and the kinds of communities where students can envision a future for themselves. I also appreciate PNM's continued commitment to local workforce investment and community partnership through New Mexico. From my perspective, strong partnerships between industry, education, and community organization are essential if we want to raise New Mexico to its highest potential and create opportunities for our next generation. In closing, I respectfully encourage the Commission to approve this application, and I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Patrick, we have time for one more public comment, so please take the next one and then we'll move on to our business items.
Okay. Next, Sandra Stolberg.
Hi, my name is Sandra Stolberg. Thank you for taking my comments. I'm deeply concerned about the proposed takeover of PNM by private equity giant Blackstone. Among my concerns is the legality of the $400 million stock sale that took place last August and what this kind of conduct suggests about how this company may operate in the future. Are we really expected to believe that the highly educated legal teams for both Blackstone and PNM simply forgot to comply with or didn't understand New Mexico law? How could PNM leadership allow a potentially unlawful or unethical transaction to proceed? This raises the question, was this negligence or was this intentional misconduct? Did these teams believe that they were above the law, that they did not need prior approval from the PRC? Did they choose to make this transaction a done deal, asking for permission only if they were caught? Why are these PNM executives not being held accountable for placing ratepayers at risk with this stock sale? Why in heaven's name are we looking to give them a combined compensation package of approximately $742,000 for a blunder? Another concern I have is I wonder about the labor unions. What do they know about Blackstone's labor violations, their massive layoffs, and especially what happened to the Steelworkers Union in Indiana just last month? NIPSCO, a utility company partially owned by Blackstone, recently locked out 1,600 members of the United Steelworkers Union after their contract expired. That little tidbit of news should give us all pause. What is going to happen if Blackstone owns 100% of our electric company? The PRC's duty is not to protect PNM executives and their compensation packages. The PRC's duty is not to protect the private equity profits. The PRC's duty is not to advance political agendas. As you know, your responsibility is to protect the people of New Mexico. I urge the PRC to demand full transparency and real accountability from the leadership that was willing to jeopardize New Mexican ratepayers for generations with this questionable sale and this questionable deal. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you for your comments. So now we'll move on to our business items. We have two items under the consent action items, commissioners. Is there any, oh, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. The next item is approval of prior meeting minutes. We have a set of minutes for the April 23 regular open meeting. I included some small revisions to the minutes, commissioners, just corrections and clarifications. And I also noticed other small changes as well. Are there any other changes or is there discussion on the minutes?
I move for approval of the minutes as they are in board effect.
I'll second. We have 2 seconds, motion in 2 seconds, so take a vote.
Seconds makes the third. Commissioner Nyberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Yes.
The motion to approve the minutes for the April 23rd, 2026 regular open meeting passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So now we really are on to our consent action items. We have a broadband disbursement request and an item related to Paso Electric Company's energy efficiency program. Commissioners, is there any discussion on these items or a motion to approve the consent action items?
I'll move to approve the consent action items.
I'll second. We'll take a vote.
Commissioner Nyberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Yes.
The motion to approve the 2 items on the consent action agenda passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to our regular action items. The first item is docket number 2566 UT. So we have 2 members of our General Counsel's office to present this item, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, Commissioners. The docket we'll be talking about today is 25-00066 UT. This case was filed by Southwestern Public Service Company back in September of 2025. The application is a request for originally 12 CCNs of generation transmission resources, location and right-of-way approvals, and other related relief. Through the course of the case, one of the CCN requests was withdrawn, and through a slew of motions and procedural orders, the Commission determined that it would endeavor to issue a final order by May 7th, 2026, which is today. So for today, there are 3 potential orders for your consideration. The OGC proposal closely tracks the recommended decision that was issued by your hearing examiners about a month ago. Broadly speaking, it would grant 10 of the CCN requests with conditions, and it would decline to determine one of them. Additionally, you have 2 alternate orders to consider. The first alternate, again, broadly speaking, would also grant 10 CCNs, decline to determine one, but its major difference from the OGC baseline and from the RD would be that it would grant an exception to the utility for the REA's 2045 zero carbon requirement for the 2 thermal generating resources in the portfolio. The second alternative for your consideration today is perhaps the most different. It would grant 5 of the CCNs that are in the portfolio. These 5 are the renewable and storage resources. It would deny 5, which are the thermal generation resources and the 3 transmission lines, and it would likewise decline to determine one of the transmission resources. On the REA variance issue or exception issue, the second alternate, like the OGC and RD, would deny the exception. So that's kind of a high level overview of each. I can break it down section per section and compare all 3 if you wish. But I will turn it over to you for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Just one clarification so that we're all on the same page. In the presentation, you explained that two of the options would deny one of the CCNs. Can you elaborate? No need for legal advice on that, but just kind of what exactly um, is that in reference to?
Yes, sir. And I will correct one mistake. The second alternate on the REA exception issue dispenses with that issue rather than determining it because the condition precedent fails, which is the CCN for the thermal generating resources. So sorry for that misspeaking. To your question, the three orders would decline to determine one of the CCNs, which is the CCN for the Tulk to Potter transmission line to be located in Texas. And the determination generally across all three orders is that the record was insufficient to make the determination.
Thank you. Yep, that was the clarification I was looking for. So thank you for the presentations, and just out at the outset, thank you to everybody who has been involved in this case. It's been not very many months since the case was filed in terms of CCN proceedings. So I do want to highlight that there's been a lot of work done in an accelerated time frame, which is, I think, reflective of what the growth of this commission and what we've been able to do with the resources that we've been allocated. So, just want to thank the legislature and the governor. One of the things that we set out to do when we came onto this commission was to make sure that we are ruling on cases timely. And I think this is a good example of that. And with that comes a lot of analysis, and not just from staff at the commission, hearing examiners, utility division, but from the utilities and stakeholders. So that is recognized and appreciated as well. So commissioners, we have a large, complex, significant case before us, and as our counsel explained, we have before us three alternative options that we can select from, and they're quite different. And so in thinking about how to organize this discussion, I think it's probably best to start with the biggest issue, which is the CCNs. And I think we could then go through different items, sections of the orders that we've had the opportunity to read and consider, and then at the end look to see which of those drafts best reflects the conversation that we're having here today. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, it appears to me that two of the orders are, I'd say, simple, at least in the result. One order is definitely dissimilar. I don't know if it'd be more efficient to discuss whether or not that one order would gain any traction, because if it does gain traction, we don't need to spend much time on the other two orders. It either disposes of the necessity to discuss the other orders, or it fails, and then we need to see which fork in the road we take. But that to me would be maybe more efficient, would be to see if there's any traction to disapprove the five CCNs that were illuminated by Mr. Lundy.
Yeah, that sounds similar to what I was recommending and what I had in mind. And so I think part of the CCNs we can take care of maybe quickly because it's similar across the three drafts, and that's the CCNs that are not related to the gains and tolk, the non-transmission CCNs that are not related to gains and tolk. So this includes the renewable resources, battery, energy storage systems. All three of the alternatives would make the same determination to approve those CCNs. But I do want to pause there to see if there is any discussion on those items at this moment.
I don't think there's any disagreement on those items, and yeah, and I think they track across the board. I would like to point out that the one item that the three orders are in agreement with, but was requested and we defer action really is the transmission line that's located in Texas, and it's not because we don't think it's necessary or anything. We don't have the record, but from my point of view, it was more jurisdictional. Not sure you need our permission to build that line in Texas. But the other renewable resources that are in the CCN request, obviously my order would grant them. I think the other two orders do as well.
Yep, thank you. And there is a careful analysis and wording in each of these sections. And so, you know, as we talk about before, the commission speaks through its orders, and I intend to write separately because I might have some nuance differences to some of these items. And so for now, I'm kind of focused on the larger picture. What is the practical outcome of the order? Do I agree with it? And if I have general agreement with the order, then I intend to vote in favor of whatever section that is, and then write separately if I have a nuanced disagreement. So now, with respect to the CCNs for the gains and tolk units, this is where the conversation or the orders differ. And so, well, also somewhat related to the exception. So I think it might be a little difficult to talk about just the CCN for gains and tolk without also talking about the REA exception and the other zero carbon exceptions that were requested. So, you know, I think we could talk about those together. And at this point, I want to open the floor up to see if either of you commissioners would like to lead us or to start us off with this discussion.
I'll volunteer because I'm the author of the order that's the most different. So it's funny when I look at the three that are out there, there's the RD, which everybody's seen and they've read. There's the two that aren't out there yet. The alternate that grants the CCNs differs from the RD because it also grants the exemption to the REA. And then there's mine. And what I find interesting about the difference between granting the exemption and not granting it is they're both rooted in the same concept. For, you know, through the case, SPS offered three alternatives of if you grant this CCN, there's three different ways we can treat this exception when we get closer to the compliance date of the REA. And so first of all, the compliance date for the REA isn't till 2045. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But those options are path dependent, right? So if you start with rate-based treatment of these plants that hard to see right now how they comply with REA in the future, that creates a path dependency where the PUA and our obligations as commissioners to ensure recovery of invested capital and those type of things kick in. So we've got a couple choices. We could go with RD, and I think that based on precedent and past commission actions, there is opportunity to deal with REA in the future, but it'll be messy, and the applicant, SPS, will start that game on second base, maybe on third base. So if the law is important in 2045 and there are other options available, we're dealing with an embedded rate-based asset and our law. So for me, just the logical conclusion, now is not the time to grant the exemption. It's also not the time to grant rate-based treatment of these assets. So really, one of the things, and I've already written something that I will publish after I wanted to hear the discussion today. I want to see how the commission voted. The problem isn't that these are thermal gas plants. It's that they're rate-based thermal gas plants. That shifts the risk in ways that aren't good for customers. And also away from the Renewable Energy Act. So what I'm saying is no on the assets, just because there's no way for me to separate the capacity that is needed from the rate-making treatment that comes along with a rate-based asset. I mean, what's pointed out, we've got this Appendix B to the RD that has a ton of different things we could choose from that are on the record. I don't think any of them really work. And so that was my goal, was to say yes to the capacity because I agree it's needed, but didn't find a solution among the options available to me, because they were developed on the record, that would address the situation and the risk appropriately. So I think say no. I also think Excel has all the tools to put something together that could be acceptable. So the problem with, and the other thing that I find compelling in the record is, and I agree with, is the RD doesn't go far enough on consumer protections. And so a lot of the Appendix B is about consumer protection. Two elements on consumer protection. One is rate-based treatment, for better or worse, means the highest annual revenue requirements are day one. So you've got this triangle that starts on day one and declines over 40 years down to nothing. In this case, we've got a basket of resources, two of them, Gaines and Tolk, we've got a fork in the road coming, 2045. So if we get to 2045, world's better. We don't need Gaines and Tolk as rate-based assets anymore. First of all, that's a game that we're starting on second base. Second of all, consumers have paid a lot up front in the 19, well, it won't be 19 years, but in the 10 to 15 years that this thing's been in rates for something that then eventually they didn't need. And then the other is, once you grant a CCN, and this is really tied to the size of these projects, then we go into cost overrun rule territory, and that's okay. Cost overrun rule was implemented back in 1987, back last time the commission was dealing with super large investments of the Palo Verde units. But once you get CCN certified cost overrun rule, then the incentive for the utility is to, well, let me come in like $1 below that certified amount. You don't have an incentive for the utility from this point forward to manage the cost of these projects and bring them in significantly below what's the certified cost. So that's a consumer protection concern. And all this leads up to the only reason I'm okay saying no is because I believe there are alternatives out there that SPS has. The one that I've spent some time thinking about and researching the history of is, why not do a class 1 transaction? They've got the development rights for these resources are owned within Xcel's family of companies. Rather than transfer those assets out of the corporate development arm into the utility, they could write a contract and propose that as an affiliate transaction. And then in that world, you've got a flat payment for this capacity between now and 40 years from now. In that world, you have a contract that may have a reasonable option to meet the REA when we get there. And then again, this isn't a novel idea. PNM has done class 1 affiliate transactions as part of the building of PPAs to serve Meta. So it's not like I'm out there thinking something that has never happened before. And then just because that's an idea I have, Xcel's an enormous company with lots of talented people. We saw them as witnesses in this case. If I say no today, it gives them the incentive to do 2 things: preserve the time and money that they have already invested in these plants, and recover that investment through a better vehicle than rate-based. So again, and then once you pull that thread, don't need gains and toll logic. It's hard to say also need the transmission lines that were tied to gains, but again, none of this stuff, say no today doesn't mean it can't come back. We've got an amazing foundation of a record in this case. If it was something that had better consumer protection, and frankly, for all you large customers out there, this would be cheaper for you up front. And then it would preserve the state of New Mexico's law, the REA, for an examination when we get closer to the date. And part of this, and you'll see this in my opinion, like why I think consumer protection rose to the top in this bucket was, and I do not know whose responsibility that is. So we had one intervener calling for imprudence, but I can't do that because I don't know really why this happened. But the RFP for these resources is not the product of a competitive environment. SPP's system is so bad right now. There is no transmission that we can't interconnect load or generation. There is only one viable new point of interconnection on the whole system, and SPS owned it. So you didn't have a real competition in the RFP for resources that could meet the load. So lacking that element, competition, then the cost overrun rule is what gets a little squirrely. If we had a robust competition, it was best among all the bids, then we certify and use a cost overrun rule. That to me is a more reasonable construct. But the world we're in right now, that's not possible. And it's a feature of how SPP's system has evolved to this point. The fundamental reason why I'm not ready to give up on the REA right now is, Commissioner Nybert on the RSC, my experience on the RSC, there are lots of changes happening right now on SPP system. Consolidated planning process. We're about to see a bunch of transmission lines that are getting built. So just within 5 years, the situation on SPP system will be fundamentally different. I believe those are improvements. So opportunity for an actual competition, for a real RFP. Also, between now and 2040, a lot is happening in the resource development world. There will be options available that are not there now. So I got more, and it's in the thing I've already written, but I think in terms of explaining why I proposed an order that denied the cease, that it's.
So, Commissioner O'Connell, I agree with you with respect to the consumer protections. And there are two that stood out to me. They were highlighted in staff's exceptions and ideas. They might have been OPL's ideas, but one of them was this idea that in 2045, if the commission rules to not make any decisions about what happens to these resources in 2045, why not say now that if New Mexican ratepayers are not receiving benefits after 2045, then they should not be charged for any of the cost after 2045. That, in concert with another idea, which is to require straight line depreciation. Those are two items that I are not included necessarily in this draft right now, although my thought process there was that those are items that could be better handled through what would be the next process here, which is the actual rate case and that would come after this, to where Excel would propose, if the commission approved the projects, would propose to recover the costs. Do either of those help you? Because clearly there is a milestone in 2045 that is a vital part of this entire case. The other side of it is how you pay for that. And so if you're paying for what you're using and then not paying when you're no longer benefiting, to me that is a path forward here. And I wanted to see what your reaction is to that.
Well, yeah, my position, I acknowledge, isn't black and white. I mean, there is a need for capacity. So that's why I spent so much time looking at as many ways as I could. And frankly, I started with the intention of voting yes and grabbing something from appendix. But each time I got thinking down the road of all of those items, what I landed on was what is the incentive, right? So I prefer mine to that answer, even though I could see that as being a reasonable outcome, because I don't think it gives SPS the incentive to live up to the law, right? They've got bird in hand, and so that becomes part of the portfolio, and there will be several portfolios between now, or several IRPs between now and then. They're all going to be premised around those resources as a feature of the portfolio. And I got to tell you, I was frankly flabbergasted by SPS's reliance on their multi-jurisdictional baseline and their IRP throughout this process, because what that lacked was, okay, let's look at 2045 when the compliance date is possible. Basically, what it did was prove to me that implicit in SPS's request is once these suckers are in there, they're not coming out. So anyway, making it so that the evaluation in the future is more of a fair race to run is the thing that fuels my belief that saying no right now is the right answer. So again, I'm one of three here. If the commission goes another way, I accept that result. That's how this body of three of us is designed to work, right? So, but no, it doesn't get.
Mr. Chair, the thought of even causing over 50% of the requested generation assets for the amount of energy produced by the generation assets to not be secured after today's meeting, allowing the utility to move forward on those projects, gives me great concern, because that energy is needed not now, but yesterday. It's been needed for over 50 months. People have been waiting 50 months for meters in southern Eddy and Lee County. And that's why I think I was very moved and insistent that we put this very docket on a fast track, and we had the meetings in December that held their feet to the fire, despite some pushback. And so I hate to see anything that would potentially delay these resources from providing energy to southeast New Mexico, where the current demand is such that these resources will be immediately put to use. It's not dissipated. It's real demand that needs to be met today. So that would be my concern with the proposal of denying, the natural gas generation facilities that comprise 54% of the electrical capacity of this total request. So I'm concerned about continued delay. I think we're all concerned with the issue of affordability. Say we all. That is the hot topic of the day everywhere we go, from FERC on down, because everybody here knows that cost of electricity is going to continue to rise, going to be more acute with vast generation coming on board, additional transmission coming on board, and just the inflation issues that utilities and everyone else have had to deal with. So we know costs are increasing, and that's a disappointing reality, but that's what we're facing. But when you don't have energy, the issue of affordability is seen through a different prism. If it's scarce, you're willing to pay more just to have it. And that's a situation that exists in certainly southern Eddy and Lee County, to the point that a lot of oil and gas operators have had to spend a lot of money bringing on their own generation, diesel or natural gas generation, to power their facilities. And that's, we can get into a big debate whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, but certainly it's not optimum for the oil and gas industry. It's not optimum for the utility, and frankly, it's not optimum for the people that have advanced the arguments for the renewable energy. So I am not in favor of issuing an order that would deny those resources today. I think the utilities gone through an arduous process to get to where we're at today. The record's clear that the energy resources are needed. I think the record's clear that the thermal generation is needed at this point in time. Maybe a different boat 20 years from now, but right now, the thermal generation was proven to be needed. And so I think if it's proven to be needed and the costs appear to be reasonable or in line, then I would suggest that it should be granted by this body. We should issue the CCN for those facilities.
Yeah, I think my reaction to that is that we went down to southeastern New Mexico and heard from people, and I mean it's no secret that the oil and gas industry wants, and I'd say needs, power to run their operations. But they're also practical. They're not going to do that. They don't want that at any cost. And so that's one of the issues that I go back to here is, and as you talk about the affordability, because you're talking about speed, and I get that. It's important to be quick, and to be completely frank, it's important to reduce those emissions from diesel generators that are running right now to run those operations. That, to me, displacing those high emissions with cleaner energy is a big driving factor here. But you don't do that at any cost. And while I do agree that to meet the capacity requirements under SPP's planning reserve margin and how they accredit capacity, while I do agree that meeting that capacity, these thermal resources achieve that more quickly, I also don't think that's the only solution. I also question, as Commissioner O'Connell said, whether this was competitive. We received competitive bids because there's limited interconnection capacity, and that's why we're seeing here resources that are being cited where existing resources are about to be retired. That's why we're seeing Excel avail itself of the surplus interconnection service, is because in an ideal competitive environment, you'd be able to interconnect anywhere and it'd be quick, but that's not the case here. And so I don't think speed is the only issue, although it is certainly important. I think that the bill that comes along with speed is important. And we have a proposal before us. As I'm looking at this, yes, did I want more from this process? Absolutely. I wanted to see more bids for batteries, for example. I mean, when you compare them to the thermal generation here, frequency response, for example, yeah, the thermal resources can help within minutes, but the batteries can help within milliseconds. the price of batteries continues to decline. That's not true for the thermal generation. The price is increasing. There's more delays. They rely on volatile fuel prices that also are increasing and are dependent on whether there's a war or whether there's other cold weather that creates competition for that same fuel. And so that's what, you know, I to really talk about the affordability issue in the long term, I don't think this is necessarily the answer. I don't think this is the answer. Let me say it more clearly. This is not the answer, because what we got from Excel is an analysis that shows that buying the capacity and including these thermal resources in the portfolio, it is less expensive to achieve our capacity requirements. But that's not where the analysis stops. You got to consider that fuel, that volatile fuel. You got to consider station power, operation and maintenance. You got to consider how the resources perform or are expected to perform in a market, how much revenue they're going to earn over the course of the life of that resource in a market, and how that is going to then translate and affect into and affect customers at the bottom line, which is the, you know, the bill that they're seeing. So speed is important. It's like $5 billion worth of thermal generation here. So I don't, to me, it's not a slam dunk as what I'm hearing from you. And then there's the elephant in the room, which is, you know, the zero carbon in 2045. So anybody want to talk right now? That's somebody else who's not me.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that Mr. O'Connell make a motion to see if his order passes. If it doesn't pass, then we need to discuss the other two orders. And if it passes, then we're done for the day. Or then until we get to the wildfire thing. But we're done on this topic. So.
I think before we get to any motions, let me go down the list of other topics that we would discuss. You know, the other thing that we haven't discussed is the exceptions that were requested. And you know, for me, I guess tackling first the 343 megawatts of generation that Excel is requesting to be considered as zero carbon. I think there are very persuasive arguments from the opposition that the request should be denied. And my job here is always to be open-minded, and I did that and saw both sides of the argument. I'm not persuaded by the analysis. I'm not persuaded by the reasoning. I do wholeheartedly agree that the emissions that are being that would be reduced or could be reduced in theory are important, but I think that's separate and apart from the law as I read it. Commissioners, is there any discussion on that?
I don't think there's any departure on that issue. I think all three orders recognize that the 340 or 363 megawatts to not be designated as zero carbon resources at this time. And I think we're aligned on that. So I don't know why we need to discuss it.
If there's no further discussion, then I think we could then move on to the other exception that is requested with respect to the REA. And actually, let me back up a little bit. I remember actually why I raised the 343 megawatts is because the draft includes two of the drafts include this idea that, and it comes from the RD, that the issue should be discussed with in a larger venue with other stakeholders and the other utilities presumably. And I don't agree. I don't think that issue needs to be discussed any further. And so that's one of the areas that I would deviate from, is that I would revise that analysis to clearly say that the exception is denied, and because the argument is not persuasive. But I'm happy to live with what the order, at least two of the orders, say in those sections right now, and clarify further in a separate concurrence. And then with respect to the other exception, the REA's 2045 zero carbon requirement, I think that Excel provided some options that we can select from. And one of those is to not make any decisions on that right now. And just for my part, I think that's a smart strategy, because if we were in a position to, if we were asked to make a decision on that right now, I'm not sure that it would go Excel's way. And so I think recognizing the reality that we're living in 2026 and not 2044 or 2043, there are things that can happen, and we just don't know the circumstances right now, and we can't. And so I think it's fine to defer that decision to when we have more concrete circumstances that would allow the commission to make a ruling. And yeah.
Mr. Chair, it sounds like you want to go ahead and have the discussion as to the difference between the two orders that allow all of the requested CCNs, save the water to gain, or wherever it's at, the Texas transmission line, to be approved. So if you want to go into that discussion now, I'm happy to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's the part of the agenda. So it's, I was thinking we'd go through these different topics, and then after having the discussion, then we can have a better idea of where we all are and which motions we should be voting on drafts.
So as I hear it, we haven't disposed of anything at this point. If you don't mind, I'll get into the justification for the order that I have submitted. Basically, that order really tries to look at a big picture, because I think today's meeting is vitally important. I think it's vitally important for my part of the state, eastern New Mexico. It's obviously important for Southwestern Public Service Company. But I would argue that it's vitally important to the state of New Mexico generally. The proposal before us not only provides the generation needed to meet growing demand, but to meet existing demand that's already on the system. And we need to decide if we can accomplish our primary duty and advance the regulatory compact while advancing the public policy goals of this state. And it's a difficult thing to do. It's been on the tops of, I imagine, all of our minds for several weeks now. And frankly, it feels like we're between a rock and a hard place. I also recognize that this is but step one of several steps that are likely to ensue, particularly if some other things come into place within their service territory. They call for and will recognize a retirement of a coal plant. We grant a 3-month extension in this order, or in 2, I think all 3 of the orders probably. We grant an extension of time of 3 months to that coal plant so that it can meet some reliability obligations over the summer period. But that coal plant produces significant energy today and has for a good portion of my life. I remember when it was built. The coal plant will be retired. SPS is faced with the situation of how do we make up for that over 1 gigawatt of energy that it's providing to its system today. They need, SPS needs, and Southeast New Mexico needs more energy. And so this proposal adds additional renewable resources, wind, solar, and battery storage. But it does not meet the entire, I think you said 5+ gigawatts of energy that's requested. It meets something less than 50% of that demand. SPS is faced with anticipated growth in addition to the existing demand that I've already talked about. Southeast New Mexico, when we went on the tour, was talking about growth. City of Hobbs has more than doubled in size in the last 10 years. Carlsbad, I don't think has doubled in size, but it's significantly bigger than it was 10 years ago. So it's not just the oil patch that needs the energy. It's communities, it's people, it's residents. We have to, or SPS has to supply reliable energy to those customers. And I think the record reflects that these thermal resources will assist in its ability to meet that obligation. The life of those thermal plants are 40 years. And the record reflects that those plants are needed now. The record reflects that those resources are needed now, and that the renewable resources cannot make up all the needs that are currently exist at the present time. So SPS has to do something. In many respects, SPS's request shows its progress in meeting the state's non-carbon goals and its effort to try to continue to meet those non-carbon goals. That's why a little less than half of this portfolio is renewable energy. Well, this request, as I said, extends the coal plant for 3 months. The energy produced therefrom has to be replaced. SPS is discontinuing its coal operation. Solar and battery storage projects will join SPS's substantial wind energy assets that it already has on its system. When we traveled from Portales to Hobbs, we drove through the middle of the Sagamore Wind Project. All the red lights that we saw around the car were wind towers in that Sagamore project. And in West Texas, SPS has significant wind projects or wind generation facilities in West Texas as well. So I think it's doing and investing its dollars to continue to meet those benchmarks that are set forth in the Renewable Energy Act. However, in 2026, as we sit here today, and probably for the next number of years, SPS finds itself unable to affordably and reliably replace the thermal generation and meet the growing demand for energy in southeast New Mexico with merely renewable energy resources. Got to do something. I know people in southeast New Mexico have the same expectations that every person in this room has. And that is when you turn the light on, you want it to go on. Flip the switch, you want it to go on. And it's people in Lee County that about a year ago had to suffer a power shutoff because of lack of energy being capable of being delivered down there now. The good news is that the Nextera line is now fully energized, and that will help with some of the reliability components, but it doesn't meet the demand. It can't supply enough power to meet the demand. There needs to be more transmission, but there also needs to be more local generation. This process that SPS has gone through is not an easy process. The hearing was not an easy process, I suspect, as well, but stakeholders showed up at meetings, they provided comment, they went through that process, and I don't think anybody hit the ball that part of the proposal was 2 thermal generating facilities that would provide substantial energy resources to that system. Natural gas, it's been referred to as a bridge fuel. I think we're still on that bridge trying to get to the maybe one day where we see the capability of being fully renewable or reliant on renewable resources, but I don't think we're there yet. So that natural gas could be utilized in these units to boil the steam or make the steam to generate the electricity. A lot of gas, by the way, will probably come from New Mexico. And as the chair already indicated, hopefully it will alleviate what has occurred, and that is diesel and natural gas fired generation units that are not nearly as efficient or as clean as what a utility scale gas fired generation plant would have. All told, SPS is requesting to construct, generate, and market 3.9 gigawatts of electricity in this proposal. As we stated, 54% of that is from thermal resources, the remainder from renewable resources. Put that in perspective to people that don't, not the people in this room because they probably already know this, but put it into perspective for others who may be listening. PNM and El Paso Electric are approximately 2+ gigawatt systems. Currently, SPS is a 4.5 gigawatt system. This proposal is obviously a large proposal. It's large not because people want it to be large, but because the demand requires it. In order to supply the energy that's needed on that system, they need to come forward with the 5+ gigawatts or approximately 5 gigawatts of energy. SPS and the commission has received and is trying to address the concerns of citizens, the communities that we ventured to, and we've heard from the oil and gas industry. There's a representative here today from Conoco, and they all have expressed the need for energy in that part of the state. SPS, probably more than us, is aware of that increased demand. I know that some people have been fairly animated in their demands to some of the SPS folks that have had to deal with these issues of not being able to meet the demand that exists in southeast New Mexico. You know, we talk about energy and it's somewhat amorphic, but we all depend on it. We depend on it more today than we ever have, and we each are using more energy today than we ever have. Plug in our phones, we use our computers, we make searches on Google and other search engines, and that all takes energy. So when I reviewed the record is very clear. Additional generation sorely needed, not only to replace retiring facilities, but to meet existing demand and to reasonably meet anticipated demand that will be on that system that is reasonably known and was reasonably established in the record. Delay is not an option for us, as I see it, if we want people in southeast New Mexico, or frankly all of eastern New Mexico, to have reliable energy. The record's further clear that thermal generation is required at this time to meet the reliability metrics. 2 of the 3 orders before us concur in this regard. 2 of the 3 orders before us approve SPS's request for the CCNs with conditions. As pointed out earlier, all 3 orders approved the solar and battery request. All 3 orders likewise recognize the demand for energy that SPS faces. My focus is on 2 areas where the recommended decision and the order that one of the orders that's before us, where I depart from those two things. One issue I admit is fairly minor. The second issue has substantial legal and practical implications that will have, frankly, some long-reaching impacts. The first issue is a 3-month variance request. The recommended decision, well, not the recommended decision, the order that OGC initially prepared basically provided language in there that in my opinion, did not give the commission or did not reflect the commission's broad discretion in granting variances and found that due to prior precedent that we had to give third parties basically veto power over our grant of a variance, and I disagree with that. I think that we ought to be able to grant the variance and not worry about a stipulated settlement that occurred years ago, the results of which were enforced, and that facts have changed in the intervening years. They need a 3-month extension to the coal-fired plant. I think the variance is warranted, and I think all 3 orders reflect that variance is warranted. But I don't think we should put language in the order that reflects that we have to do the things that that order requested. So I toned that down a little bit. I also found that we should give those 3 parties a copy of our order and give them a fairly short period of time to object. I agree with the outcome. I just don't agree with the very strong language that's in the order. And if indeed that is our prior precedent, I would encourage us to overrule that precedent and allow us to continue to utilize our discretion as we see necessary. Utilize that when circumstances are appropriate. Well, I do agree with the other order that the variance should be granted, bottom line, and give them notice and an opportunity, but I don't like the language that's in there. The second issue, which is the issue that has more importance, more wide-ranging implications, and frankly, is the issue that's probably going to engender the most debate. It's an important issue. It has far-reaching effects. The question is, do we simply kick the can down the road, or do we provide certainty? For me, I'm going to advance a certainty argument. I'm going to advance the argument that we should approve the thermal generation, and that requires us to engage in what I would consider a 2-step analysis, because the time period between when those plants would be operational and December 31, 2044, going to be somewhere between probably 15 and 18 years. I don't know how long it takes to construct a gas-fired plant, but I suspect it takes a while. So it's not going to be 19 years, because 2044 is 19 years away, really, at this point, 18 years away. So it's going to be somewhere in the 15 to 18 year range. I would argue that our primary duty as a commission and our primary role, as set out in the Public Utility Act, requires us to advance the regulatory compact between utilities, communities, and the people they serve. I think it's important for us to advance the goals of that regulatory compact. And for those of you that aren't immersed in the utility world, show you that I've learned a little bit in the last year. The regulatory compact is basically a compact between society and a monopoly, where society recognizes that a monopoly is the most efficient mechanism to deliver certain resources due to their very nature. That compact also says that governmental oversight is necessary to prevent the monopoly from using its sole position to extract more money from its customers than is reasonable. Succinctly stated, It's an implicit bargain between the public utility and regulators where the utility is granted an exclusive service territory, and in return, it will receive a guaranteed recovery of its reasonable cost, plus the opportunity to earn a reasonable rate of return on its investment of capital. Utilities commit to provide safe, reliable service, and they and the regulators, us, strive to ensure that such service is provided at just and reasonable rates. That's why we exist. That's what the Public Utility Act provides. The recommended decision approved the thermal facilities, but it then stated that SPS's ability to continue to produce the electricity from those needed facilities after December 31, 2044 is an issue to be determined later. I don't see that in the regulatory compact. I don't see that as our job. If the life of that asset is 16, 18 years for New Mexico customers, then we have to repay that in 16 to 18 years. And we have to allow a reasonable return on the opportunity for a reasonable return on that investment. So the recommended decision and the record reflects the thermal facilities are needed, and I believe the commission should approve them. But to have SPS potentially have to shut down those facilities after 16 or 18 years causes some problems. It requires a second point of analysis. Again, our duty to carry out the regulatory compact and as set out in the Public Utility Act is to ensure that the request is reasonable, the record reflects it's reasonable, as it is needed, and that it's at a reasonable cost and advances the public interest. I think the record reflects that it does that. Therefore, we must allow SPS to recover its costs and give it an opportunity to earn a profit from these thermal facilities that it intends to build. And I would argue that's our primary duty. Our primary duty is to make sure that it can provide reliable service and allow it to recover its costs and hopefully do so in an affordable fashion. And if we can't do it in an affordable fashion, then Commissioner O'Connell's order has some merit. Because if we can't do it affordably, then we my mind shouldn't be. We can't approve anything, and then people go without power. But, I think the Public Utility Act is pretty clear. We have to discharge that duty. The disagreement with the recommended decision is over whether the thermal facilities have an end date of December 31, 2044. So the second step in the analysis, it's shown that it's needed and is reasonable. The second step is really getting to the affordability issue. Does that shorten time period in which that asset will provide benefits to New Mexico customers? Can it be paid for, turn a profit within that shortened time period? Due to the uncertainty of numerous factors over the next, I'll say 19 years, but really less than that, we will contribute to that uncertainty if we accept the recommended decision and the order that reflects the recommended decision on the delay in determining the fate of the thermal facilities. While this is not a rate case, our granting of the thermal facilities requires us to address and provide guidance on how SPS will receive its cost recovery and the opportunity to earn a profit. If there's a possibility that SPS would have to abandon the thermal facilities on December 31, 2044, then we must, as to the New Mexico allocation, allow SPS to recover its cost and profit within that time period. I'm going to use a word, Miguel's going to disagree with the word, but the only way I can get my head around it is the word amortization. So reducing the amortization from a 40-year useful life to somewhere between 15 and 18 years, will that result in a substantial increase in the burden to New Mexico ratepayers? As a result, I spent time and effort trying to wrestle with that issue and the impact it will have on the communities in southeast New Mexico, my community, my neighbors, frankly, myself, as it directly affects me and the people that I've served for many years. I had to reread the Public Utility Act, the Renewable Energy Act, and the ETA to see if there's anything that can give us guidance on how to deal with the quandary that we face. We hear about the 100% zero carbon goal all the time, but there's a little bit more to that statute, thankfully, and as set out in my order. The REA, Renewable Energy Act, does provide this commission with some flexibility. It says that as we move toward the zero carbon goal in 2045, really the 80% in 2040 and the zero carbon goal in 2045, that exceptions may be warranted in limited circumstances. I agree that they should be limited circumstances. Those exceptions are directly tied to our primary duty and the primary goals of what every commission around the country is directed to do, and that is to ensure reliability at just and reasonable rates. That latter phrase is the affordability phrase. As I've stated about 6 times now, the record is clear that the thermal resources are needed at this time. That 1+ gigawatt of energy at this juncture is needed sorely, and it'll have to be replaced. And then the other resources just to try to meet some of the demand. Well, I think an argument could be made that an exception is warranted for reliability purposes. I focus solely upon the affordability component to support the argument for this commission to grant an exception. Well, I understand why the recommended decision may want to sidestep the issue. I don't think we should. I don't think the commission should sidestep the issue. I think we should take it head on, because I think if we sidestep the issue, we're setting ourselves up in 2045 for a regulatory taking, unconstitutional taking. So the question became, will rates be affordable for New Mexico ratepayers if the thermal facilities as to the New Mexico allocation are repaid, plus allowing SPS an opportunity to earn profit there in the years from the approval of a rate increase through a rate request to pay for these facilities with an end date of December 31, 2044. Well, I had Mr. Perez look at the numbers in the record and estimate an impact of what a shortened recovery would have on rates to our ratepayers. Due to the tremendous cost of these facilities, the impact from a greatly shortened period of repayment, shortened over 50% of the useful life, will require a substantial increase to the point that it will have, quote, an unreasonable impact to customer electric bills, close quote. That's the very phrase used in section 62-16-4B3, which allows an exception if we find that it will create an unreasonable impact to customer electric bills. Essentially, that section in the statute provides that as we reach the 80% and 100% zero carbon goals, the legislature recognized and provided, and again I quote, in administering the standards, goes on, the commission shall, subsection 2, maintain and protect the safety, reliable operation, and balancing of loads and resources on the electric system. 3, prevent unreasonable impacts to customer electricity bills. I think it's clear from the record that the only out that we have, because the resources needed today, the thermal resources needed today, that we know today will not comply with the Renewable Energy Act goals, is we have to grant an exception. Otherwise, we grant the CCN to allow the thermal generation. We have to make sure they get paid back and allow a profit. That can't be done affordably. That can't be done without having a major impact on customers' bills. And so the legislature has granted us some flexibility to deal with this issue. I urge this commission to take advantage of the opportunity the legislature has afforded and grant the CCNs, grant the exception, and allow SPS to recover its cost and profit that'll be determined in a rate case over a 40-year period, which obviously goes past December 31, 2044. I'll be prepared to make a motion.
Commissioner Nybert, your mic was off. Can you say all of that again?
I can put it in the record if you wish.
Yeah, you know, I think what you've explained is just kind of hitting on the exception for the REA. The argument is raising this idea that the costs of the plant need to be recovered in 18 years or by 2045. That's not what this case is about, though. And so it's kind of creating a problem that's not before us and then addressing that problem that's not before us. Because, you know, one of the last things you said is that we have to make sure that they get paid back and make a profit. That scares me to say it in those exact terms, because what we need to do is allow a reasonable opportunity for the utility to recover their costs for prudently incurred investments. And there's a difference. And what the utility has done here is provided an option that says, if you don't make any decisions with respect to the REA right now, that is okay with us. We can leave that to a later date because that option gives them a reasonable opportunity to recover their cost. So I disagree that we have to let them recover their cost. We have to give them a reasonable opportunity, and so that I think if the idea were that they have to recover these costs over the course of 18 years, then this is not the right portfolio. Then we definitely should deny it and then have the utility rethink all of this. You know, that's where I land on that issue, and I also don't agree with bringing affordability, because that's the problem with it, is that if affordability is the only consideration here, we're talking about very expensive peaker units. These are simple cycle combustion turbine units. They're not going to be running all of the time. They're not a replacement for the coal generation. You can't only consider the capacity. You have to consider all of the costs that come with the plants in the future. The fuel, the operation and maintenance, and other things, the outages, right? The fact that it's reliant on a natural gas transportation system that is often constrained when you need the units most to run. And so I just don't buy. Is it true that this portfolio, compared to other things within the record that Excel proposed, this portfolio would meet the capacity requirements more cost effectively? That is true. But what Excel did not show, and what they did not provide, is the actual cost of the resources going forward. And they certainly did not include, their analysis stops at 2045. They certainly did not include the costs that go all the way 40 years out into the future. So what basis would we have to say that that is more affordable? And in fact, the longer that you continue to look at the life and compare the life of the resources, the renewables are going to look a lot better, because they're going to have zero fuel cost, not very much in O&M cost for the life of their service, whereas the combustion turbine their costs are going to continue to increase. So I object to that characterization of affordability, because I think it's either incorrect or is misleading. It's simply not true.
Mr. Chair, you made a couple statements, and I'm not sure that they're true. Number one, pipeline capacity constraints out of the Permian Basin do not affect these units. They're built at the locations because not only is there an abundance of natural gas, the natural gas that's there can't get out to other markets because of the very pipeline constraints you talk about. But they can get to these areas very easily. In fact, I don't know exactly where in Gaines County the plant is to be sited, but I would imagine that you're talking about a pipeline of a mere few miles at best. the amount of gas that is available for these plants is right there. It doesn't face the capacity constraints that the Permian Basin generally faces because they're located in the Permian Basin, or at least the Gaines County facility is. The Tolk is north of there, but the pipeline capacity constraints did not affect these facilities. The second thing is the record reflects that the resource mix that was presented was needed, including the thermal facilities. They're needed now. It didn't question whether they needed 100% renewable energy mixture. In fact, I think the converse is true. There's a recognition that thermal resources are absolutely vital, at least for the next number of years, to provide that baseload power and frankly, the reliability metrics required, because they're losing over a gigawatt of energy from a coal plant. So it seems to me that the CCN, our very granting of the CCN, necessarily means that we find that it's needed and that they can go forward with it. And then you say we don't have to determine the payback and stuff now. That'll be determined in a rate case. But what we need to determine now, we're going to grant these facilities. We need to assure SPS, because the recommended decision says they may have to close it down December 31, 2044. That was teed up in the recommended decision. If we grant the CCN to build it, I think that they should be able to rely on the fact that they can continue to operate it for the lifetime of that unit. And that forces us to be able to find an exception, or we're going, in a rate case, going to have to allow the recovery. It's the Public Utility Act's clear. We have to allow the recovery of their reasonably incurred costs, and you are correct, an opportunity to earn a reasonable profit on top of that, based on their invested capital. And when I shortcut it and just said earn a profit, I necessarily mean have an opportunity to earn that profit. But by granting the CCNs, they have an expectation that they are going to be guaranteed cost recovery. I don't see anywhere in our statutes or the regulatory compact that I mentioned that's one of the platitudes of this whole deal, is that if we approve these things, they should be able to expect that they're going to get their money back and an opportunity for a little bit more because they've invested their capital. So that's why today is so important. You know, if we're going to force these things to be shut down in December 31, 2044, then it seems to me we got two routes to take. We either, in a rate case, we're going to have to allow recovery as to the New Mexico allocation over a shortened period of time, or we're going to have to enact the exception that the legislature's provided. I don't think we get it both ways.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. Across the country, the accredited capacity for natural gas generation has been decreasing because they are competing with other consumers of natural gas. You look at ISO New England and PJM, and their accreditation is much, much lower than it is in SPP. And as you continue to add more competition for that gas without adding additional capacity, it gets even harder. And during times of system conditions, natural gas for heating is prioritized. And in most instances, receives a higher priority. And so it is a fact that a gas plant could be curtailed. And then just the other thing is on the need. I think all of the drafts recognize that there's a need. I think even the one that does not approve the CCNs, I think what it's really asking for is a different, if I'm understanding correctly, is that Excel has not shown that this rate recovery, planned rate recovery financing structure is not the right one, but would still provide an avenue to meet that load by having them come back with another proposal. So and then the other draft that meets the RD, that aligns with the RD and is the OGC recommended option, that one also approves the CCNs. And so they all address this idea that there is a need. Sorry, Commissioner O'Connell, you were going to say something.
Well, no, I just thought I should weigh in. The starting point is I think our primary duty is to regulate. And so the law helps guide us on how to do that. Our primary duty is to regulate. And just paraphrase the mighty Alfred Kahn, what does that mean? If you're not in a monopoly situation, just the competition incents competitors towards efficiency, customer service, and reliability. So if we're regulated a monopoly, that's not what they're doing. And it's effective regulation then should incent movement to the highest and best goals of what's in the public interest. So our duty isn't to shovel money at utilities because they spent it, it's to regulate. And so what I'm trying to achieve here is an incentive for a better outcome than what we have on the plate here. At the moment, the invested capital is not at SPS, it's at Excel. As soon as we grant CCN with rate-based treatment, that's going to move it over to SPS, and incentives will shift at that point. I also think this whole 2044 as a terminal date for these units is a bit of a straw man. And it's contrary, frankly, to Excel or SPS's testimony in this case. You know, they were talking about, hey, give us a chance. We'll figure out a way to keep these units used and useful beyond the ETA date. They had one attempt, which wasn't very impressive on the call it zero carbon. But again, big company, creative, lots of ideas, give them a chance to actually work towards that. If we throw it into cost of service as rate base, we've diluted that incentive. And then, you know, funny thing happened on the way to today. I was at the Northwestern Electricity Dialogues in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and the lady who's the CEO of Excel's utility in Minnesota reminded me that Excel has a corporate vision of 2050 zero carbon across the whole company. So it was like, well, this is getting kind of weird here because we're fighting over 5 years, 2045 versus 2050. And can't tell you how many times SPS warned us about don't split the system in their testimony and their hearing. Well, they're planning to go portfolio wide 5 years later. So that whole thing got me back to the only way this becomes something that just runs forever as is if we say yes under the conditions that have been presented right now. So yeah, my intention here is to get a lower first year revenue requirement for all customers, to get an actual option in 2045. I think a contract does that the best. Again, Excel, big company, lots of ideas. They might have a better idea than that. But allow them the time and space to work with the incentive to actually succeed. So anyway, that's where I was coming from. And this is something you'll see in the thing I write. You know, I've been hearing natural gas as a bridge since I started working at the gas company. So this was 15 years ago or more. And New Mexico law defines the bridge, right? It isn't from now till when we figure it out. It's from now to 2045. So again, I've got a oath of office to New Mexico's laws, so I'm hanging my hat on 2045 is important. I don't think these plants go offline at the stroke of midnight of 2044. Excel or SPS will have opportunity to ask for a variance in advance of that. It could be on affordability grounds. It could be, hey, these units should be reassigned elsewhere. REA doesn't allow that, but it's in the same paragraph as the other conditions that were cited for this exception request. So if you're a future New Mexico commissioner in 2040 or 2043, and you're looking at that exception request, you're equipped with the knowledge that, yes, this is the right answer for compliance with the law, for customers, for reliability. So I don't see it as kicking the can down the road, but I see it as putting the pressure on now to achieve all of the goals at once. Let's not write one of them off right now.
Okay, well, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, and there are other issues that maybe are not ripe for discussion because the orders don't disagree with themselves on that, on those issues, and so maybe obviously the orders discuss them, but we don't necessarily need to discuss them right now. Well, I can't log into my computer anyway. Oh, there it goes. And so I think then with that, we're probably ready for a motion, and there's like a big range of where we are, and I really do believe that the order that aligns with the RD and that is recommended by OGC is the one that would have the most chance of the biggest chance of success, and that's the one that I would vote for. And I'll explain why. Because I think one thing that Excel did well to help their application is ask us to not make a ruling on the 2045 issue, the zero carbon 2045 deadline, because we don't know right now. We don't have the information to rule on that. And I think if our hand is forced to say whether the REA exceptions should be granted, my answer then is no, it should not. The law says otherwise, and I don't have any information right now that I think is persuasive to grant that exception. I think that I do have a desire to see a different portfolio. You know, I asked questions during the hearing, and we also have reality, right? Excel is using the surplus interconnection service because that is what is available. They're proposing generation where they already have generation because that is where the interconnection capacity is available. And that's what is going to help right now. I also think it's very important to help the Permian Basin reduce its emissions. And this portfolio would do that. I also, you know, when I started, I was asking questions similar to some of the interveners, which is, you know, why didn't you propose a combined cycle plant? And which is more efficient, and you know, it seems that Excel was concerned about the delay. They're also more expensive. But the other thing that I believe in through this portfolio is that the thermal generation proposed here, they're not a replacement for a baseline coal facility. These units are not going to be running all of the time. They're going to be running when they need to supplement renewables, when, you know, the sun goes down or whatever happens, or they're going to be running when it's really cold and we need more generation, or when it's really hot. These are just not going to be baseline units. And I think that the bench request 3 information that Excel provided shows that. And so that makes me appreciate the entire portfolio more, and now it makes more sense to me why Excel didn't propose a combined cycle generation plant. And the law, I mean, it says that resources have to be zero carbon by 2045. Sure, it includes some exceptions, but we're not there yet. And the order that OGC recommended balances all of those elements in the law, and it also balances, Commissioner Nybert, what you're saying about providing a reasonable opportunity for the utility to earn its investment, but it also balances what customers are going to have to pay. And so it takes into account, although I'll talk a little bit more about this, but the affordability issue. And the one thing that I would like to see more in it, and it is the consumer protections. And so it's you know, what I would add again are those 2 requirements that were stated that I stated earlier, that come from staff's exceptions. And so on the whole, I think that it is a just and reasonable proposal that I can get behind. That said, I'll go out on a limb here and move to adopt the OGC recommendation that largely aligns with the RD with some exceptions.
Mr. Chair, I'll second your motion, but I would also like to add an amendment. And that would be to modify the variance language to take out the language that I think really does a disservice to the commission committee to open a soft play that. And if I'd even move, frankly, to overrule prior precedent if that's necessary, but if there's there's no need to do that, but I'd certainly alter that language to soften that pretty explicit.
And Commissioner Iber, I think you're talking about the stipulation and the fact that, am I along the?
The coal-fired plant variance and regarding the stipulated settlement that brings in 3 other parties and does all that. I would sure soften it up.
Okay, and so the idea here is that the current retirement deadlines came from a stipulation that the commission approved, and the order here would extend that deadline. And so I don't see this as a big issue that will cause a problem. But I'll explain why I think that is correct, is because if the commission can modify any stipulation, then stipulations begin to lose their value. How can the parties have confidence in any stipulation if the commission can later just change it? And so I think that it is important that our current precedent is important for that very good reason, is that we need to stand by the orders that we issue and the policies and provisions that we approve. And so I would not be in favor of modifying that precedent, because I want stakeholders in the industry to continue to have confidence in stipulations, and I want to continue to encourage them to stipulate.
I would disagree that that number one, the parties got exactly what they wanted in the stipulated settlement. It's years later, facts have changed, and now we're faced with exercising potentially some discretion to extend that based on circumstances that weren't even known at the time that stipulated settlement was reached. To shackle this commission with having to get approval to change or to grant a variance on an issue that was decided by the commission based on a stipulated settlement years ago, I think it's bad policy for us to put into place requirements that are in this order. I mean, it's pretty explicit in this order that basically require us to go back to those parties and get their approval to grant a variance. And I think we should retain the ability to grant variances without having to go through those processes. I agree with you that in this case there's only 3 parties, but you could have 15 or 20 parties, and some of them can't be found. How are you going to get them to come to the table? I don't know, but I would soften the language up so it's not as explicit as it is in the order that you've moved, and tone that down, because it's a step too far for me. But
well, I don't think we need to force them to the table. I think what we need to do is just give them reasonable notice, and if they don't comment, they don't comment. If they do comment, then we can adjudicate that on an expedited basis. But is there is there specific language that you would want to revise?
I'm a little confused here because we got a new OGC baseline draft, and the baseline draft I'm looking at says preponderance of evidence supports granting requests for limited variance for the abandonment dates for Tolks Unit 1 and 2 from December 31st, 2028 to March 31st, 2029. Next paragraph just says due process requires non-parties, COG, FEA, and Walmart be permitted opportunity to protest. So the language that Commissioner Nybert's talking about wasn't in the draft that I saw come out most recently. So is that language that we've got more recently acceptable?
I guess I haven't seen.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been busy.
Mr. Ledeen
I totally
drafted
get it.
all of it, so maybe Mr. Ledeen can tell us what the current state is on it. But you said due process requires. The word requires. I certainly would tone that down a little bit.
Thank you, Commissioners, for the question. So each of the orders before you would grant the variance pending protest, and the pending protest, what that means is just allowing those three non-parties an opportunity to be heard on this issue. But it wouldn't be, it's not an outcome determinative process. Obviously the commission, if it received any protests, would consider
But
what to do
did
with it.
you take out the language where you went into explicit detail about the prior precedent of the commission, and you discussed in some detail that issue? Is that gone now?
So that section was rewritten following the discussion of the closed session. From I guess the criticisms that I heard there, and I thought that I had addressed it, but I'm not sure if you've seen that exact language or not. But it is.
Is that the only paragraph that due process requires?
That's in the findings and conclusions, and then the body of the order has a fuller explanation. But I believe all three orders that are in board effect right now reflect the updated, the post-closed session edits that I made. And then yours additionally has further edits.
Robert, can you please remind me which paragraph that is in the most recent draft that you sent?
Sure. Do you want the clean or the red line?
Clean. For once, I'm working in the clean version.
So for the findings and conclusions, it's paragraph 117 and 118. Scroll over. And in the body of the order, the discussion of that issue is at from paragraphs 55 to 59, and particularly it's paragraph 58.
At the end of 58, what if we change it to the commission will allow instead of must explicitly?
And you delete the footnote. And then in the paragraph Commissioner O'Connell read where he said due process demands, can't you just say will allow them to object or whatever?
Is there? I think we just talked about a couple of changes, and the other one that I wanted to. Well, we have a motion, we have a second, so yeah, we're discussing. The other one.
We don't have a second on the amendment.
No, we haven't. Okay, so Robert's rules thing, that seems like a motion within a motion, but okay, so let's first take that larger vote on the general order, and then we can.
No, you gotta do the amendment first.
Okay. All right. Let's do a vote on that amendment that we just discussed regarding the language on notice with respect to the existing retirement dates.
Now, the amendment would be to allow Mr. Ledeen to soften the language regarding the variance issue. That would be the motion. That would be the amendment to the main motion.
Okay, well, okay, so the other amendment that I would include in that is to include a requirement as, and this can be found in staff's exceptions, that would require straight line depreciation and also includes the language, which I think is very reasonable, that if New Mexican ratepayers are not receiving benefits in 2045, then they should not receive costs.
Mr. Chair, that's not an amendment to my amendment.
No, I'm combining them.
Yeah.
To
I think you should dispose of the First Amendment and then you can make an amendment to your main motion after the First Amendment is disposed of positively or negatively.
we can't do two amendments together.
You can amend an amendment, but you can't have another amendment while the other amendment's on the table. You have to dispose of one amendment at a time. You can amend my amendment, but you can't bring another amendment at the same time that the amendment's on the table.
A lot of amendments. I think the cleanest way to do it is to consider the First Amendment, see what happens with that, and then move to amend your original motion. Chair.
Okay, let's consider that First Amendment regarding the stipulation.
If it hasn't been seconded, I'll second.
Okay. Then we'll
ready for a vote.
Commissioner Nyberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Yes.
So the Commissioner Nyberg's amendment to the the chair's original motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So I'll move to amend the draft to include two requirements, which I have explained. One of them concerns straight line depreciation, and the other one concerns this idea that if New Mexican ratepayers are not benefiting in 2045, then they should not be allocated costs.
Technically, Mr. Chair, I concur with that. And so since you made the original motion and I concur, your main motion would include that now without a vote on.
Okay.
Because since you're the sponsor of the motion, if you get the person that seconded it to agree to something, then the main motion's modified.
Yeah, my little Robert Rules slider thing from the 1950s basically said you only need this if you're getting close to a fist fight. I think we're pretty far away from that. So,
Is that what you're saying?
as long as we understand what we're voting on, that's the goal, right?
But we've got the spacing.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the motion that I think we all understand is on the table? Okay, so I think then we're ready for a vote.
Commissioner Nyberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell.
No.
So the motion to move, I think it's first order number one, correct? Order number one with the, including the amendment that Commissioner Nyberg had made, including the changes that the chair made to his original motion, passes on a vote of 2-1.
So commissioners, it's almost 12:45, so I think it's a good time for a break because we do have a presentation coming up, and so
Commissioner Chair, I'm very sorry. I have one clarification to make about this footnote discussion. Did your amendment, Commissioner, remove or?
It allows Mr. Ledeen to soften the language.
But we're not touching the footnote.
Well, that can be. I mean, I think that footnote needs softened. So that's part of it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
how long of a break do you need? Do you need a lunch
2
break, or do you need a power through? Okay, so we'll come back at 1 o'clock, and thanks for sticking with us. Sorry for the lengthy discussion, but we clearly had some business to discuss. So
it needed to be done.
Yep.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait, Ralford Cohen.
We tried to make that as a public, but there's only like 7 people.
Yeah, no, I think Ray Gibbers owns them all.
Owns all of them?
Because he bought a box of them. I personally hate Alfred Cohen because he's the reason.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
when he deregulated airlines, that came with, you can make the picture. As you want.
Well, and now they give you a little bit more e-room, but then they brought this people don't
welcome back. So we took a short break and now we're on to the discussion and potential action section of the agenda. So we have Mackley Keyrol, who is advisor to Commissioner O'Connell, and then we have future PRC employee Kathleen Tepe, and currently DOE fellow visiting the PRC, and also Ms. Erica Avila-Stefans from our General Counsel's office to present a matter regarding wildfire mitigation. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Although you've had the opportunity to review both the Statement of Policy and the Public Safety Guidance document ahead of this meeting, we wanted to provide a detailed overview, not only to answer any questions you may have, but also for the benefit of our utilities and the public. This Statement of Policy is coming from a decision made during the Commission's November 13th regular open meeting. At the conclusion of a successful series of wildfire workshops, our next steps were unclear, and ultimately it was decided that the Commission should develop a Statement of Policy on Wildfire Mitigation Plans, or WMP, content and filings, responsive and preventative measures such as public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS, planning and communications, as well as the use of protective equipment and device settings, or PETs. Data sharing principles consistent with security obligations and integration with ongoing grid modernization work. Based off stakeholder feedback and in the event the legislature introduces a wildfire bill in a future legislative session, the Commission elected not to undertake a formal rulemaking. The 2026 legislative session saw several wildfire-related bills introduced. However, none passed, and thus the work on this Statement of Policy and PSPS guidance document continued since no changes to the Commission's jurisdiction in this regard was changed. Giving a brief overview of the purpose of the Statement of Policy. Ultimately, this policy serves as a guidance document for our utilities. It is neither a rule nor regulation. Despite no statute or rule requiring the submission of the WMP, we want to acknowledge and also applaud the majority of both New Mexico's IOUs and co-ops have already been submitting their plans. That is why the policy seeks to build on the work they've already been doing instead of initiating formal rulemaking to promote consistency, transparency, and accountability in how utilities identify, prioritize, and mitigate wildfire risk. You'll notice that currently when comparing WMPs from different utilities, they have similar content, but information is potentially housed in different sections or categories. It is our hope that by not only sharing the Commission's perspective on best practices, but also providing a preferred layout for plans, will facilitate the review process from the Commission, stakeholders, and the public. I will reiterate that the Commission is not currently reviewing the plans to approve, accept, or deny, but if the utilities should choose to adopt this preferred format, this uniformity from plan to plan could help when looking for an answer across different plans. The policy also presents what we are calling an informal procedural schedule or deadline. We're recommending an annual review of a plan ahead of the traditional wildfire season in New Mexico, which is around late January. Again, this is a suggested timeline proposed to promote efficiency that our utilities can elect to follow or not. Yeah. Ultimately, the policy aligns with the Commission's overall mission to regulate public utilities in a manner that ensures safe, reasonable, and proper service at fair, just, and reasonable rates. As the policy is not only laying out a preferred format, but recommending considerations utilities should be making when thinking about their mitigation strategies. For example, optimizing mitigations to be cost-effective, and when possible, integrating mitigations with broader projects or maintenance. History in other states have shown that wildfire can be detrimental to the utility's ability to provide service and thus the goals of the PRC. This policy is one more avenue to promote how utilities can best prevent their risk. Next slide. In this potential policy, the preferred layout for a WMP has 8 sections. Each section has an overview of the issue, the elements recommended to be housed in that section, and a more detailed perspective providing examples of what best practices can look like for this mitigation category. To start, I want to especially highlight the executive summary section. as realistically a utility is not going to need to fully change their W&P each year. This policy recommends that at minimum the executive summary be updated annually. It should provide an overview of the plan and serve as a history for what the utility has accomplished based on previous plans in recent years. Next, we go into a section on the overview of the service territory, which is meant to demonstrate a utility's understanding of wildfire exposure across its service. Elements that we are suggesting in this section are the service territory itself, the amount of customers they serve, and where their risk areas are. Our next section is going to be the risk methodology and assessment. This section is looking at how the utility is not only identifying their risk, but prioritizing mitigations. Is their methodology emphasizing cost-effective mitigations? Some examples of our suggested elements are modeling tools and their cost-benefit analysis. The next section would be their vegetation management program. This section should detail how a program is tailored to the specific utilities, geography, terrain, and vegetation characteristics. What we're looking for in this section is their trimming schedules, how they're maintaining their right-of-way, and considerations of wildlife in their area as well. Our next section would be grid hardening and system resilience. How is the utility upgrading and designing its system to reduce the risk of utility-related ignitions and to protect infrastructure against wildfires? What we're looking for is, are they undergrounding? Are they replacing their poles? Are there grid modernization projects that align with wildfire mitigation as well? Our sixth section is going to be weather monitoring and situational awareness. This is where we want to see how they're operating their system. We're looking at, it's also where they're monitoring the PSPS policy. We're looking for weather stations, their meteorology, and also just their general operational practices. The next section would be emergency preparedness and response. How is the utility prepared to respond to an event when it occurs? These are usually rapid and quick and very sudden. Looking for elements of workforce development, incident command structure, and after action reporting, especially since a lot of our utilities will sometimes use contractors, making sure that your contractors are equipped to respond, and how are they doing so? The last section would be public communication and outreach. What communication channels are they using? How are they not only notifying due to events, but engaging with the community to prepare them for when an event happens? Again, this format is what the Commission recommends for a robust plan. If there is an element that does not impact the utility or one the utility thinks should be considered that has not been laid out specifically in this list, it is entirely up to them to include in their plan. Additionally, by no means is it the expectation that if it is decided to issue this statement of policy, that utilities should reformat their plans that have recently been submitted or are shortly going to be filed. But we ask that they consider adopting this layout in their next review. Finally, Finally, the statement of policy has provided utilities with the Commission's perspective of best practices, but also notes that the Commission will continue to promote opportunities such as workshops and informational sessions for learning and information sharing opportunities. The annual wildfire informational session is an example of one of those potential options I wanted to highlight since a session was held just a month ago. Again, this is entirely up to future Commission decisions, but wanted to highlight one of the potential options for information sharing. I'll move to Mackley for the PSPS guidance document.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Commissioners. For the PSPS guidance section, I'll talk about why the guidance is needed, potential gaps under existing rule, and some recommendations. The main point here is we already know that Rule 560F already requires IOUs to maintain curtailment of service plans. Somewhere along the way, that rule turned into a specific wildfire de-energization plan. Say that 10 times fast. It was written to maintain system reliability originally. So this guidance document is intended to bridge that gap without opening a full rulemaking or amending the rule at the time, similar to what Kathleen was saying about the overall wildfire policy. So this guidance document explains how the existing curtailment rule can be adopted in the wildfire context, specifically for PSPS settings, PEDS, and fast trip settings. So it's meant to create a basic baseline for planning, communications, documentation, and reporting. It's not meant to replace utility operations or impose anything on their service territory, because that would be wild. So the balance that the guidance document tries to capture is the need for real-time discretion in wildfire conditions, while giving the commission all the information they need to understand how the tools are being used, how customers are being affected, and whether the utilities approach is reasonable. So the reason why guidance is needed, as I said, is that Rule 560F was originally designed around emergency curtailment needed to maintain system reliability and integrity. Wildfire-driven de-energization raises a whole different set of issues. In the PSPS situation, IOUs intentionally interrupt service, not because the grid can't serve load, but because there's an ignition risk that exists under dangerous weather or fuel conditions. That distinction matters here because it directly affects customer impacts, emergency coordination, communication, and restoration planning. And as you'll hear, this is like a theme of what we're talking about. And like Kathleen said, we applaud the IOUs that have already been filling out their PSPS plans with the commission. But the record doesn't provide a uniform baseline for comparison or oversight. So the purpose of this guidance is to make existing curtailment plans clearer, more comparable, and easier for the commission and stakeholders and public to review. And this ultimately all ties back to the PUA's basic premise. IOUs are expected to provide safe, reliable, and affordable service. And the PSPS, it creates tension with that premise because while the IOU is intentionally stopping service to avoid a greater public risk, and that's justified in extreme conditions, it shouldn't become a vague, inconsistent, or unreviewable process. So now let's talk about the potential gaps under this existing rule. And this is the core reason why the guidance is useful. Because, as we know, the current rule doesn't expressly define PSPS or anything related to wildfire-specific criteria. That means all the different IOUs could develop different trigger points, different thresholds, and different practices in terms of reporting. The rule also doesn't distinguish between traditional reliability curtailment and from wildfire de-energization. That distinction here matters as well because there is a difference between those two things. One is for maintaining system operations, and the other is for reducing ignition risk and protecting public safety. Also, there's no commission-wide baseline for customer notification or coordination with emergency managers, and that creates risk for customers, especially the medical vulnerable customers and critical facilities and local governments. Finally, there's no consistent reporting framework for PSPS events, PEDs, or fast trip settings. Without that, the Commission has limited ability to review these effects on customers, impacts, outage duration, restoration timing, coordination issues, you name it. Okay, so to close, here are some recommendations based on the guidance document. First, we believe the Commission should clarify that PSPS, PEDs, fast trip settings are appropriate subjects within the 560F curtailment framework. It doesn't have to be done via rulemaking, it can be done via an order, which is something that will be future looking. Second, the Commission should set baseline expectations for curtailment planning regarding communications, documentation, and follow-up reporting. That includes everything from identifying wildfire risk triggers, decision roles, customer practices, emergency coordination, and post-event reporting. A key piece of that is re-energization. Right? And this is something that I learned recently from our wildfire annual meeting, that a PSPS event doesn't just end once the weather improves, it's a continuous thing. So before restoring the service, IUs need to determine whether the equipment and the facilities can be safely re-energized. And I know they do, but for the future, this will help guide IUs to explain their prerequisites for restoration, inspection process, and coordination, and communications. Third, and this is something that the Commission does already, but we just say that we believe that the Commission should maintain their flexibility in this, because it allows us to maintain comparability across the IUs while leaving the real-time decisions to each utility. And long story short, this is intended to be a practical oversight tool, not anything that's going to the level of rulemaking. This reinforces that wildfire safety may sometimes require temporary curtailment. At the end, affordability, reliability, and accountability remains central to the IUs. So thank you, Commissioners. We stand for any questions.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for the work in putting this guidance together. So there's no rulemaking here. This is a decision that the Commission made last December. I think that's okay. I do think that the commission eventually should have a rule, but the reason I think it's okay is because in thinking about what really matters here, for me, it's that the utilities are proactive in addressing wildfire risk, and they have been. And so that's why, to me, the fact that this is a guidance and not a rulemaking is not that big of a deal. I think generally this commission has been very supportive in being proactive and wisely investing in wildfire mitigation. And I don't go as far as to say there's like a blank check, but it is very important because the consequences of a wildfire are so great, and one event that is avoided by investing in wildfire mitigation is already, the benefits of that are already worth the cost. And the more wildfires that don't happen, that value just continues to grow. And so just wanted to share that. Also think that this guidance document, as the legislature continues to think about or consider potential pieces of legislation on the issue, this could serve as a basis for what a piece of legislation could look like. Also with respect to the PSPS, they should be the exception, not the rule. But that's also why the utilities are investing in better technology and more infrastructure that can help avoid a PSPS altogether. I mean, the goal should not be to have one. They might be necessary, but the goal should be to manage the conditions in a way that allow us to still have reliable energy, but also ensure the safety of people, communities, and the system. We had a series of workshops here, and it has led us to this moment. And so that, that's how a lot of the information that is in this guidance has come to be. And so thank you, to the team who presented and put this together, and to all of those who were involved during the workshop series. That's what I have, commissioners.
You hit on one of my big things was I really do think New Mexico needs legislation. And so this helps get us to that point, and legislation will be way more comprehensive than guidance. I fill out a wildlife mitigation plan. When I was looking through these documents, reminded of the procedural history. This started with back in 2022 with a request for everybody, including the co-ops. So could you tell me how this guidance document relates to or does not relate to co-ops?
So when providing the guidance document, it was not specifically made with the differentiation between the co-ops and the IOUs, but that was partially because it is just a guidance, mainly considering that they can elect to add any of the elements that we say, and realistically, what's going to apply to them. So there are certain things that the co-ops are not going to probably add to their plan, and we acknowledge that. It's not maybe necessarily written out there in the guidance document, but by it being not statute and not required, we're just laying out best practices and what we know, and lots of those can go both ways.
Okay, so basically we're saying if you do a plan, here's what it should say.
Yeah, essentially, if you're going to do a plan, here's what we view the best layout to have, the best format, and also some more of the most generally accepted best practices. It's definitely not all encompassing, but it's highlighting the best ones. And also, I want to also point out a lot of it is talking about not just reducing your ignition risk, but when a fire happens, if it's in your service territory, how are you going to make sure that your infrastructure is not as affected as it could be?
Okay. And then it's interesting because, through that process, EPU's like, we don't have risk until their insurance company told them you need this plan, right? So then I guess we should expect to see more plans get filed, even though we're not requiring them, because utilities are getting incentives from more stakeholders than us. And then back to the incentive thing, just writing a plan and then expecting recovery because it was in your plan, there isn't the tension of adjudicated process when they write the plan. Is there anything in here that gives them the incentive to actually be efficient with how they spend the money?
I would say we definitely highlight that they should be prioritizing cost effective mitigations. There is we put in there that the plan does not mean that they're going to get cost recovery. It is not an assurance of that whatsoever. But in kind of putting out, we're hoping the commissions, here's what we recommend, that is an incentive itself. If we're also then, like Commissioner Aguilar said about potentially this as being a basis for legislation in the future, if that's in there, incentivizing that for them by just having there.
Okay. And then the last thing, and Mackley, you talked a little bit about this, but having a plan for PSPs to me isn't enough. You also need the plan for restoration. I had a 4-day outage a few years ago and it was not a fire, it was a windstorm, but I can tell you from living through that, my block, live in a neighborhood with some folks older than me and on Parkinson's and with medical equipment and all that kind of stuff. And then we weren't getting any information about why, when, how, why the power is going to come back on. So I would just emphasize that having a plan to turn the power back on as expeditiously as possible is as critical as having a plan to shut it off to try to minimize the ignition risk or if there is a fire going on so people can get in there and take care of things. So because part of my experience, the reason my whole block was out was the trees from my neighbor across the wall, backyard, blew into the power line and started to catch on fire. So I called the fire department. Like, we can't touch that because that line's still live. So the wind had to keep blowing until the weight of the trees finally broke the line. And then, then that led to a 4-day outage. So that's just a personal example of why not just is PSP important, but restoration is also super important. And I'm looking forward in future versions of plans to see more on that.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I totally agree. Just found out about this recently, but no one ever thinks about this. Public safety power shut off, but not public safety power turn on, right? It's the other side of that. And that the rule doesn't say anything about it, right? So that's why we believe the guidance document will help because we actually say that should be there for reporting and just documentation purposes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just have a few questions or comments. Did the guidelines go back to the committee, or I know we continued the work group, right? And did they review this prior to today?
Thanks for that question, Commissioner. No, the Senate Memorial 2 working group did not review it, but we reviewed it internally within the PRC Wildfire team.
But no utility
no.
Or co-op has reviewed it?
No, Commissioner.
But I would encourage you to have this as a topic of discussion. I know we continued the group, right? I would ask them to review it because they may have some other things that they see that ought to be included or have some problems with some things that are in here. and you're asking us to sign off on it. I'd be interested to see what their feedback may be before we sign off on it. But and then the other statement, I know that there are a lot of changes, and probably much of a result because of what I did last night. Wasn't expecting to, but I think it still needs some eyes on the document. There's some typos and some other things to be cleaned up before it gets. Those would be my two requests. Run it by your group and see what they have to say about it. We can change it at the next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, that's a great idea to run it by the group, but also because it's a guidance document, I don't think we should put too much stock on if, I mean, we'll take in their feedback and criticism, but we shouldn't put way too much stock on what they're saying because we're not requiring them to do this. This is just a guidance document.
No, but they may already have internal guidelines that aren't part of this that may be great. So why would we not want to maybe expand that or take some of their feedback and deal with some of the things that they might bring up? I have no idea. Maybe it's perfect. Maybe everything you got in here was from your group discussions. I don't know, but I was just interested if they've had their eyeballs on it at all.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And I'm sorry, Kathleen.
I appreciate your feedback, Commissioner. I wanted to add that the basis of this, a lot of it was taken from the workshops and also from the Senate Memorial 2 report that came out. And also looking at the bills that were passed in this past legislative session, not passed, introduced in this past legislative session to see generally, because a lot of those were introduced by our utilities, to see kind of what was included in there, at least in terms of the planned content. But I hear you on wanting to get their feedback. I will also add that was part of the reason why we included the caveat that if there's anything that they don't feel that relates to them, don't include in their plan. And if there's anything that they would like to include in the plan that wasn't listed out, we would love to see that.
Well, I appreciate the document as it is, and I would vote to approve it, but I also see the benefit of, although this is not a rulemaking, reading it as such in that we put it out for comment and then have an opportunity to revise it as we deem necessary. I want to caution a little bit against that because there clearly are disagreements between parties on what exactly should be in there. I think with here, as I said, the utilities already have wildfire mitigation. Well, PNM and Excel have wildfire mitigation plans. This document is good and valuable to help with legislation and all that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is if we were to put this out for comment and then issue this later, that has no impact on wildfire mitigation because that is being done already, which is what is important. So, I think with that, what I would put out is maybe the voting on a order that would include both of the documents that are in front of us that put this out for comment. And then once we receive that comment, then we can continue to revise it. I could also vote on it today.
Yeah, all I had left was one smart aleck question, which was, when does wildfire season?
Generally, they start looking at, generally we start looking out for wildfire in like February.
Yeah, I took a tour of Seattle Underground once, and they said that the rainy season starts on October 1st and runs through September.
So then,
Well, they have the wooey.
Yeah, and so with that, we could, if we did put this out for comment, that'd be also with the opportunity to fix whatever small changes or typos might be in it, given that this document looked pretty bloody yesterday.
Yeah, I agree. It's important. It's worthwhile. How many more guidance documents does OGC want us to issue? Then, yeah. So too bad. We'll be issuing some guidance on this, but yeah, I agree. Let's just the value of the discussion today. If somebody's actively writing a wildfire management plan, they have today's conversation to help guide them. But let's measure twice.
well, Mr. Chair, I didn't intend to make it bloody yesterday. It's just that I read the order and then I read the document and they were doing two different things. And I go, I think the order and the document ought to be complementary to one another, not go in different directions.
Well, I think on that, I didn't see it that way. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that if we're clear that this is not a requirement, I think it's fine to say what a best practice is. A good plan should do this, a good plan should do that. But with the overall recognition that it's not required, you can deviate from it. But we can talk about that whenever we have a rule in front of us.
Well, you might want to get an opinion from OGC whether or not putting that language may cause some plaintiff's lawyer to sue utilities because they don't adhere to the best practices that we enunciate. That was a big concern when I went through it, was if we were putting forth standards, the utilities would be judged by those standards. And I don't think that was the intent of the document as I read the order. So that prompted me to make a number of changes.
Okay. So I guess then I will move. It'll be a little different than what I said earlier. To issue an order that puts out the statement of policy for comment. So not the order, only the statement of policy.
Mr. Chair, is that put out an order to allow public comment, or is it just running it through the committee? Because that's an entirely different process.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, well, if it's a guidance document, why don't we just give them guidance?
Yeah. In fact, I thought we did.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fair. So then, Commissioner Nybert, is the suggestion then that we don't necessarily need to notice this for comment, but instead we should reach out to the workshop or working group that includes the stakeholders from different perspectives and do that informally? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as Mackley, get your group together and look at it.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner.
Okay. OGC, good with that? Okay. I actually like that better as well. So discussion, potential action. We're not taking action right now. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay, communications with Chief of Staff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Had you asked me this to communicate with you like 2 hours ago, I would have had a ton of updates, but I'm shamelessly currying favor with staff, and I'm not going to have any updates for you today. I don't have anything that's pressing. The agency is humming along and doing really, really good, really productive work, and heads are down, and lots to celebrate, as we mentioned last week. So I won't take up any more time. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay. So moving on, communications with commissioners. It's been very busy. I keep forgetting what day of the week it is. Next week we'll be at the CREPC meeting, so I'm looking forward to that. And I think I've already talked about some of my responsibilities during that meeting. So it'll be a busy week again next week. And that's all I can handle for now. So.
Yeah, my ongoing quest to avoid responsibilities is paying off next week. I'll be at CREPC and I'll be there participating, but I don't have moderating panels. I don't have here. And then I'm going to go from San Diego to Utah. There's a class on transmission that IRLE is hosting. That's Friday and Saturday. So I'll be on all of next week. And then the other thing that's in addition to just the regular open meeting cadence is what you already talked about, the Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners. It's a very busy time. So when Troy was talking about agencies humming along, the merry little band that's been trying to make sure we have speakers for every panel and everybody knows that when they're speaking and that type of thing. That's been a lot of work. We've got our menu selected. Includes a taco bar with gringo chicken, which I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. And then it's really coming together. I mean, it's an event that this agency and I think New Mexico will be proud of. And like I say, the big thing is getting everybody together in the same place at the same time so we can learn from each other. And if we had the thing tomorrow, we would succeed at that. So right now we're just making it even better than it already is. So I'm despite, and it's like I'm complaining, but I have no idea how many emails a day Jennifer Bach is managing. But despite that work that it's been requiring, it's gonna pay off. Looking forward to that. And then we got nothing after that, right? No big cases, no other meetings.
You lie. I'll be joining my fellow commissioners in San Diego, and like Commissioner O'Connell, no responsibilities, but I'll make sure that Commissioner O'Connell is not found on the beach. I did go to Georgia to the National Association of Water Companies, I think, and there were commissioners from across the country, and it seems that New Mexico is not alone in dealing with small water entities that are undercapitalized and cannot meet failing infrastructure repairs and maintenance issues. And I've already alerted Angela that we need to do some research on some statutes from Pennsylvania, Arizona, a couple other states to see how they more expeditiously deal with some of those issues. Because I know that our staff has been working with Melody Ranch for going on a year now, and that issue has been over a year old. And apparently Arizona has some mechanisms to maybe deal with some of those in a quicker fashion, but it's an ongoing struggle. They did highlight a number of things that are coming down the pipe, literally, for water companies, and one is the PFAS contamination is going to be an expensive endeavor, which also will cause some harm to the smaller water entities that don't have the capital to deal with it. Likewise, wastewater treatment facilities, they're wanting to treat the PFAS not only at the stage of putting it into the distribution line to go into homes, but they then want to treat for PFAS at the sewer plants as well to make sure that PFAS does not find its way back into the aquifer. So some of those rules are coming down from Washington, and they just alerted us that those are issues that we'll probably have to deal with. There's other things being bannered about on the waterfront that I will do my best to keep you all informed. But we are not alone. That's the major thing. Other commissions are dealing with the same issues ourselves in. One good thing is I did get a report from our staff who's been working on Melody Ranch. There's 24 utilities, water utilities that we oversee in New Mexico, which is a lot different than Arizona. Arizona has like 350. And what was reported is about 20% of the ones that we regulate, at least initially, are of concern to the staff that we will probably be called upon to do further investigation. So that'll be things that staff may for us in the future. All I have to report.
Next is everybody's favorite section, which is adjournment. So thank you all thank you commissioners for a really good discussion and for putting everything you have into your job. That we're adjourned.